Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving straight into a chilling mystery that quite literally paralyzed a rapidly modernizing nation. We're going to explore an urban horror legend so incredibly terrifying that just mentioning her name still gives people goosebumps. We'll break down exactly how this myth works, trace its deeply tragic origins, and look at how a single ghost story managed to bring an entire bustling society to a complete standstill.
Picture this. It's 1970s Japan. This is such a crucial starting point to understand. During this decade, Japan was right in the middle of this massive, explosive boom in economics and technology. People really felt like they were living in the future, you know? They genuinely thought they had left all those old-world spirits, ghosts, and ancient folklore completely in the rearview mirror. But, as we're going to see, those spirits hadn't exactly let go of them. Right in the middle of this huge societal leap forward, a paralyzing fear suddenly gripped the entire nation. It really goes to show that no amount of modern development can completely wipe out our deepest, darkest primal fears.
And we're not just talking about some spooky rumor whispered on a playground. This was a very real, tangible, nationwide panic. The fear was so intense, so completely overwhelming, that parents fundamentally changed the way their families lived. Children were strictly stopped from walking to school. Normal outdoor playtime? Absolutely forbidden. Terrified parents were locking their kids safely indoors, flat out refusing to let them step a single foot outside the house. Entire neighborhoods just went dead quiet. It's honestly fascinating when you think about it. A modernizing society practically shutting down its daily routines out of pure, unadulterated terror.
So, what was the source of all this absolute dread? Enter Kuchisake Onna, which translates to the slit-mouthed woman. According to the legend, she's the restless spirit of a woman wandering the streets and dark alleys of Japan. But here's what made her so uniquely terrifying in a modern setting. She didn't look like your classic floating, transparent ghost. No, she blended right in. She roamed the streets wearing a standard surgical mask covering the lower half of her face. Now, in Japan, wearing a mask for health reasons or allergies was totally normal, right? So from a distance, she wouldn't stand out at all. That everyday disguise was her absolute perfect trap.
Here is exactly how that psychological trap worked, usually played out on innocent children who were just wandering past her. Step 1. She stops a child and asks what seems like a completely innocent question. She says, "Am I beautiful?" The kid, looking up at her nice eyes above the mask, would almost always just say, "Yes." But then comes step 2. She suddenly rips off her mask. The legend describes her face as violently mutilated, like her mouth had been viciously sliced open and torn apart with a sharp blade. And then, step 3. With her horrific, bleeding face fully exposed, she looks right at them and asks the exact same question a second time. Am I beautiful?
This is where it gets truly nightmarish, because the victim has absolutely no way out. It's an impossible choice. If the terrified child staring at this mutilated spirit somehow manages to stutter out a yes, Kuchisake Onna pulls out a pair of giant scissors. She then slices the child's mouth open from ear to ear to exactly match her own gruesome smile, which leads to fatal blood loss. But what if the kid screams no? Well, she doesn't even hesitate. She immediately uses those same giant scissors to brutally end their life right then and there on the spot. It is a perfectly designed, completely inescapable trap.
So we know her terrifying 1970s playbook, right? We know how she struck fear into the hearts of an entire nation. But who was she? Where did this incredibly malicious spirit actually come from? To truly grasp the depth of this urban legend and understand the monster, we need to transition away from the modern streets, flashback into history, and uncover her deeply tragic past.
Long before she was a terrifying spirit, the legend says she was a real, stunningly beautiful woman. But she was also fiercely proud and maybe a little vain about her looks. She was married to a loving samurai, but, duty calls. Her husband had to leave to fight in a war, leaving her alone for a really long time. When he finally returned home, he made a devastating discovery. His beautiful wife was having an affair. Consumed by total jealousy and blinding rage, the furious samurai drew his sword and violently sliced his wife's mouth open right down the middle. In one strike, he destroyed the very beauty she was so incredibly proud of.
Can you even imagine the absolute psychological horror of that moment? As she lay there in agonizing pain, her face completely ruined, her husband stood over her and delivered this incredibly cruel final taunt. He asked her, "Are you still proud of your beauty?" The lore tells us she cried out in immense pain, eventually bleeding to death from those horrific wounds. And it was exactly this violent betrayal, this intense agony, and the cruel mockery of her vanity that tethered her soul to the living world. She just couldn't move on. Instead, she became this cursed spirit, doomed to endlessly wander the streets, hiding her face and forcing everyone else to answer questions about her lost beauty.
Okay, bringing our explainer back to the modern era, this is where the story takes a totally bizarre and unexplained turn. After literally keeping the children of Japan locked indoors throughout the 1970s and haunting every dark street corner, Kuchisake Onna just vanished. She completely disappeared from Japan. To this day, nobody actually knows what her ultimate purpose was, why she chose that specific decade to arrive and spread all that panic, or why she eventually just packed up and left. It remains this massive, unsolved puzzle piece of the mythology.
To wrap up our explainer today, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. The legend says she left Japan, sure, but it never says she stopped wandering. So, if you're ever walking down a quiet street late at night and a masked woman steps out of the shadows to ask if she is beautiful, instead of answering yes or no, would you be brave enough to ask her why she left Japan? I mean, it's a bold strategy for an impossible choice. If you ever do encounter her and you somehow actually survive asking that question, be sure to let us know the answer in the comments. Thanks so much for joining me to unpack this fascinating legend.